Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I think Putin is determined to dominate and control Ukraine, to shape its orientation. This is a matter of deep personal conviction for him. He's been stewing in a combustible combination of grievance and ambition for many years. That personal conviction matters more than ever in the Russian system. He's created a system in which his own circle of advisors is narrower and narrower. COVID has made that even narrower. And it's a system in which it's not proven career-enhancing for people to question or challenge his judgment. So he's gone to war, I think, on the basis, Mr. Chairman, of a number of assumptions which led him to believe that Russia faced a favorable landscape for the use of force against Ukraine this winter. First, that Ukraine, in his view, was weak and easily intimidated. Second, that the Europeans, especially the French and Germans, were distracted by elections in France and a leadership succession in Germany and risk-averse. Third, he believed he had sanctions-proofed his economy in the sense of creating a large war chest of foreign currency reserves. And fourth, he was confident that he had modernized his military and they were capable of a quick, decisive victory at minimal cost. He's been proven wrong on every count. Those assumptions have proven to be profoundly flawed over the last 12 days of conflict. President Zelensky, as you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, as the ranking member mentioned, has risen to the moment and demonstrated courageous and remarkable leadership, and Ukrainians have resisted fiercely. Second, the Europeans have demonstrated remarkable resolve, especially the Germans. Third, the economic consequences of the sanctions which have been enacted so far have proven to be devastating for Russia, especially against the Russian central bank, depriving Putin of the ability that he assumed he'd have to defend the ruble. And fourth, his own military's performance has been largely ineffective. Instead of seizing Kiev within the first 2 days of the campaign, which was what his plan was premised upon, after nearly 2 weeks, they still have not been able to fully encircle the city. And so, Putin has commented privately and publicly over the years that he doesn't believe Ukraine's a real country. He's dead wrong about that. Real countries fight back. And that's what the Ukrainians have done quite heroically over the last 12 days. As you said, Mr. Chairman, I think Putin is angry and frustrated right now. He's likely to double down and try to grind down the Ukrainian military with no regard for civilian casualties. But the challenge that he faces, and this is the biggest question that's hung over our analysis of his planning for months now, as Director Haynes said, is he has no sustainable political endgame in the face of what is going to continue to be fierce resistance from Ukrainians. So I think that's what his calculus has been, and I think that's the reality of what he faces today. In terms of casualties, I know General Barry may want to comment on that, but there have been far in excess, Russian military casualties killed and wounded, far in excess of what he anticipated. Because his military planning and assumptions was premised on a quick, decisive victory, and that has not proven to be the case.
Director Barry, are you able to comment on that? And also, this massive column heading toward Kyiv, now maybe two massive columns, public reports suggest that they've run out of fuel. Are we learning that the Russian military is far less competent than we imagined? How do you assess their performance thus far?
Chairman, I think the Russian army reformed into this thing we call the New Look Army. And they task organize themselves into smaller battalion tactical groups, and fundamentally that is not a bad construct. I think they had a bad plan, and I think their logistics support is not what it needs to be to develop the situation that they wanted to do it. We can go into much more detail on that in the closed session.
Are you able to say in open session how many Russian troops have been killed?
With low confidence, somewhere between 2,000 and 4,000. That number comes from some intelligence sources, but also open source and how we pull that together.
Director Burns, whatever Putin's plan may have been on the way in, if that plan involved the installation of a puppet regime, that seems highly implausible now. How does this end?
Well, that's the core question, Mr. Chairman. I think Putin's assumptions, as I said before, have turned out to be profoundly flawed. I fail to see, and our analysts fail to see, how he could sustain a puppet regime or a pro-Russian leadership that he tries to install in the face of what is massive opposition from the Ukrainian people. In many ways, it's been Putin's aggression going back to 2014 in Crimea that's created the strong sense of Ukrainian nationhood and sovereignty that he faces today. So I fail to see how he can produce that kind of an endgame. And where that leads, I think, is for an ugly next few weeks in which he doubles down, as I said before, with scant regard for civilian casualties, in which urban fighting can get even uglier. Because the one thing I'm absolutely convinced of, and I think our analysts across the intelligence community are absolutely convinced of, is the Ukrainians are going to continue to resist fiercely and effectively.
Finally,